Hi, thanks for the intro. So, just wait for my computer to connect. So, as I mentioned, I've been working with Palestine Open Maps, and I'll be giving you a brief presentation on what we're doing and how we're using, how we're sort of connected with OSM, as well as how we're starting to connect with Wikidata. And let's see if this will connect properly. So I've been volunteering with the project since the end of last year, and Palestine Open Maps is basically based on 155 sheets, physical maps, that were made by the British colonial authorities in the 1930s and 1940s during the Mandate era, when the British government had a mandate over Palestine. These sheets have been scanned. I mean, some of them are in British Library and others are scattered in other places. But the Israeli National Archive actually collected scans of all of these and put them online under the public domain. So the people who started Palestine Open Maps basically found these maps and decided that they wanted to create a project to vectorize these maps, and so that they can be used for by researchers, historians, academics, anybody who's interested in sort of exploring the history of Palestine. And these maps are really important because they're the last series of maps before the Nakba, which is sort of just at the formation of the State of Israel in 1948. There were about 400 odd villages and towns that were depopulated, basically ethnically cleansed, and they were either destroyed totally or they were built over and given sort of new names and essentially sort of erased from history. So this is it's a historical archival project essentially, just to sort of help preserve this, not just preserve them, but like I said, sort of digitize them so that they can be used. They can be used by people who want to use this kind of information. And as you can see, I mean, this is just a little sort of screenshot of one of the maps. Because these were made essentially by the military, they were extremely detailed. Obviously, they had very clear terrain information, land use information. So it wasn't just the place names and the villages and the towns and the roads and the railways. As you can see here, you've got C's here for citrus groves, O for orchards and olive groves, and a lot of very, very rich and detailed information that the cartographers put into these maps. And also from a historical perspective, it's interesting because, again, this was done before the depopulation of a lot of these villages, so they still have the original names that were being used before 1948. So in that sense, they have a lot of historical significance as well. And the aim really is to basically sort of open source these maps in the most general sense of that word or that phrase, and to make them really easy to navigate and to use by anybody who wants to use them. So the idea is we're making a lot of these maps available in high resolution. People download and do whatever they want with. And to also, there are some ideas to sort of be able to use, to create the ability to navigate these maps essentially, but sort of navigate in a cart or a donkey, or using the old Hijaz railway and that kind of stuff. Really just sort of we have some really nice and playful ideas of what you can do with these maps in terms of using modern navigation tools with the data once we've completed it. But also to combine the data that we're generating with this project with other projects that I'll speak about briefly in a minute. So this is just a very quick sort of overview of the tech stack. We're using OSM Seed, which is a project by the Development Seed Corporation. It's a Washington DC based nonprofit. The front end is mostly Vue.js. We use the ID editor for the actual editing of the vectorization of the map. the backend is in Django and everything's Dockerized to the hilt, basically. It's just Dockers on top of it, just containers over containers. And just to give you an overview of sort of how we're actually collecting the data at the moment. Since October of last year, there's actually a couple more that should be added to that slide. So there's been about a dozen mapathons so far. We had one actually in here at Newspeak House earlier this year in January. And the last one we had was at the British Library last month. This gives you an idea of everything that's been vectorized. Well, there's been a couple more since this slide was made. And it's actually, people are becoming, even sort of first timers, I think it's probably just because we've become better at managing these mapathons. The amount of data we're collecting is growing with each mapathon. We're also starting to link with Wikidata. So obviously a lot of the data is villages and towns, and quite a few of these have entries in Wikipedia. So obviously the related Wikidata entries. Because we're using OSMC, so out of the box we get the ability to link the data to Wikidata, and we're training people during the mapathon when they are if they are vectorizing a specific place to always go and look and see if it has a corresponding page on Wikipedia or a corresponding Wikidata entry. So we're starting to use Wikidata very actively in terms of linking the data that we're generating to what already exists within the Wikimedia, within Wikidata and Wikipedia. In terms of our plans for the future, there's a project called the Palestine Oral History Archive, which has been a project that's been going on for a while to record. It's an oral history recording of many people, especially the refugees that were displaced in 1948. There's really very, very few of them left. And we're calling it sort of the second necklace, sort of the death of the last people who remember 1948, or who lived through 1948. So the Palestine History Archive is geotagging any relevant archives that they are creating, and we'll be linking it to our project so that you can, if you visit a place on Palestine Open Maps, you can hear people talk about what they remember from the era that these maps were made. We also know of 5 census data sets that were created. Some of them were sort of from the Ottoman era all the way up into the last one was, I think, 1941-ish, by the British Mandate authorities. There are some issues that we haven't really figured out in terms of boundaries, because each of the census data sets use different boundaries, so we're not quite sure how we're going to manage that issue. So anybody who has any ideas, we would be very happy to hear any ideas you have about that. But then again, the idea is if we can link the census data to the maps, then that could provide a very interesting historical exploration tool for researchers. What we're also very interested in, and what I'd like to hear is sort of any input and ideas from people about is, how we can enrich the Wikidata set about these places and place names, because as I said, with 400 villages, only a few of them, well, I'm not actually sure how many, there are quite a few that have entries on Wikipedia and Wikidata, but as we're adding, as we find ones that don't have corresponding entries, we'd like to figure out the best way to give that data to Wikidata. And there's a lot of UI stuff. Primarily, we're looking at re-rendering a lot of the stuff in Arabic, so that non-English speakers can start to contribute more actively to the project. We've just put an application into a foundation called the Antipode Foundation, and that's just an example of where we're looking at sort of using what we're learning in terms of using OSM and OSMC to generate more sort of South collaboration. So there's another organization in India this is what this application was submitted for us to work with an organization in India that also has a large collection of British colonial era maps of India, and they want to replicate what we've done with Palestine Open Maps with those maps. So we're also very interested in any collaborations along those lines. And also in the context of OpenStreetMaps, we're hoping that that we'll be able to sort of give our work with Open Historical Maps. I don't know if any of you have heard of Open Historical Maps, but being able to give whatever we're developing to Open Historical Maps as well for use in that project. So that's just sort of some ideas of the kinds of collaborations that we're looking for. That again, we're very open to any ideas that people have. If there's anything along these lines that anybody has any ideas or willingness to contribute, then we'd love to hear from you. You can find us on palopenmaps.org. That's the main website where you can access the editor. There's the code. Now the code is still, it's not properly open source in the sense that we still have to, set up proper documentation, the code of conduct, sort out the licensing through all the files and all that kind of stuff. I mean, so the code is, I'd call it publicly available as opposed to properly open source, but we're working on that and hopefully we'll have it ready. And of course, the API is available using the standard OSM API that comes out of the box with OSMC. And I just wanted to sort of give a general idea, or just a quick nod to the organizations that have helped. Matched, who's the first person listed there, has been focusing pretty much all this time for the last year on this project through a grant that he got at the Basa Open Cultural Fund Fellowship, which is set up. Basa was an active Wikipedian